Hi, Brianna.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Oh, thank you for agreeing for this interview. I know we have two interviews scheduled, and this is the first of the two. I'm going to start with your bio. Brianna Ladapo is an intuitive spiritual healer, movement therapist, and certified naturopath. She has a master's degree in English from Harvard University and is currently pursuing her doctorate in naturopathic medicine. She has also studied holistic and integrative health, plant medicine, and energy medicine. She lives in Florida with her husband and three boys, where she has a trauma counseling practice and works with nonprofit organizations to heal trafficked and exploited children. Do you have anything else you'd like to add to that, Brianna?
Oh, I mean, we could say harried mother, sleep deprived, but no, that about covers it. Excuse me.
Yeah, all things we can identify with.
Yes, I'm glad it's Mom's today.
Yeah. Okay, well, so let's talk about why we're here today. So, when I first saw your talk with Dr. Joe Ladapo at the Back to Basics conference, I want to say what struck me first when I saw you guys up on the stage is just like the love and the respect that you guys have for each other. That that feeling was palpable, and I literally was like, I need to meet this person. I need to connect with her because I want to learn how you walk in the world. And then when you were telling your story and you were so enthusiastic about homeschooling, then I was like, oh my God, this is where we're going to connect because I too am a big advocate for homeschooling and unschooling. So I so appreciate that you have agreed to speak with me today. And also, today we're not really going to be talking about homeschooling. That'll be our second interview. Today we're going to be talking about something that I read in your book that struck a chord in my heart. So you wrote a book. It's a very beautiful book called Emerging from Darkness. In it, you describe what it was like to be in your body when you were a child. And I'm going to read it here. Naturally, a joyful, sensitive little creature, I found myself quite incompatible with my surroundings. My most vivid early memories are of the relentless assaults on my young senses. My ears rang from the cacophony of screaming adults, roaring transportation vehicles, and explosions from the nearby military base. My eyes squinted and teared in the penetrating light from bulbs and screens. My skin burned and swelled in response to the glorious yet unforgiving sun and wind. My tongue singed and recoiled from harsh chemicals with every bite of processed food. My nose puckered and flinched from the unbearable stench of rotting garbage and noxious perfume. But oddly, no one else seemed to register these intrusions as bothersome. Okay, when I read your description, I I was so heartbroken because I think about how we never think about the child's perspective and how it feels to be a freshly embodied human in this world. I mean, I've never heard anybody describe how they feel as a child and how overwhelming it can be. I can't even like, I can't stop crying. um, can you share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, and thank you so much. It just really is such an honor and makes my day that it touched you like that. So thank you for letting me know that. When I was little, at first, because we define the world through our own experience, I really couldn't understand why everybody else was not feeling as intruded upon by all of these things as I was. And yeah, I was looking around, just hoping for some sort of proof or kinship that someone else was having this experience. And even my sister, who is a couple years younger than me, didn't seem to be having this reaction. Um, there's another a day that I actually mentioned in the book too, just because it sticks out so much in my mind. My family took this trip to the Ponderosa Ranch because my dad was a big Bonanza fan. And, it's a Western themed place. So it is all gunfire and explosions and strong smells and noise. And I just, oh God, it was like being, I don't want to be histrionic, but it was hell for me. I literally hid in a porta potty, which is pretty unthinkable for someone who's sensitive. And nobody else had this issue. And after a while, not just that day, but going forward, I tried to express to my family what it felt like for me when someone would slam a door or shout at me or force me to eat something that my body was telling me was not okay to consume. My body was actively rejecting it. Like, here's my gut saying, do not put that in your mouth. And my parents are saying, you have to put that in your mouth or you can't do X, Y, or Z. And it's very confusing when someone demands that you ignore that voice in your soul. And so I became really annoying for them. Not only did they not share my experience, they were really bothered that I was having this experience and they took it personally, almost as if it was some sort of a judgment about their experience or their lifestyle. And that was kind of the beginning of the end of all of our relationship. I felt like an alien from the moment I got here. And it took me many years till I started to meet other people who experience the world in this way and were sensitive. And I used to really resent this sensitivity. I used to think it was a terrible curse. But
Right.
as I grew up, just because it caused so much pain and so much dissonance in my relationships, especially with the people who we're told are supposed to accept you and love you no matter what. And that was not what happened. So I really hated it. I would pray it away and wish that I could just be normal or whatever I
Yeah.
was telling myself. But as I grew up, especially when I started to really deal with the trauma that was there and get on the other side of it, I came to hugely appreciate that sensitivity as a gift. Because now looking back, I recognize that my family and so many others had so much trauma they were dealing with. They were forced to create distance between their true self, their soul level self, and the world they were existing in, whether it was, in their marriage and their jobs and their friendships and the music they listen to and the foods they choose. All of those things are a reflection of what's going on inside of us. And so we did not understand each other, probably still don't. However, I have so much more empathy for where they were coming from now as an adult. And it's definitely made me a better parent to my children because when they say something, just because I may not understand it or be having that same experience, I check myself and say, well, you know what? I don't have to be having that experience to have this be completely real for them.
Right.
And so it's been a long road getting here, but I'm so thankful now that I have that sensitivity. I no longer call it a curse most of the time.
Right. It's a gift. It's a gift. Yeah, it seems that, the more stories that I hear, those that have sensitivities, it's always a gift. And even now, when we look at the children that are here with us now that are super sensitive, when I talk to mothers of children like that, when the mothers are aware, they realize that the child is a gift. And they're so grateful to be an experience with this child that shows you the world in a different light.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I've learned more from my children than they'll probably ever learn from me, though I'm doing my best. But whereas I'm certain my parents saw me as a burden, like, oh, what are
Mhm.
we gonna do with this kid? She can't watch Old Yeller without crying. We can't take her anywhere. I would cry at commercials. It just seemed like I felt everything, and I couldn't understand why nobody else was feeling the emotions of other people. But boy, I gotta tell you, having the children that I have, and all children are amazing, but it seems like the children coming in now, especially for the past, I don't maybe 15, 20. I'm not even sure if I could put a timeline on it, but it's relatively recent. there is this amazing energy, this divine, perceptive, deeply kind, graceful, magnanimous, royal, regal energy about these children who clearly just know so much more than we do. Thank heavens they're bringing their wisdom.
Yeah,
But
that they really do, and it really takes this is why Perfect Child exists, right? Because we as parents have to do so much deprogramming and so much of our own work and really be willing to shed our egos and
yeah.
our concept of what we know is right and, like, listen to our children and really be willing to pause and say, "Wait a minute, what are they trying to tell me?" And it's
Mhm.
hard.
It is. It is hard. It is hard. In fact, they're probably the number one source of moments where I realize I have more work to do. Not that
Oh,
I'm ever harboring the delusion that I didn't, because this is a journey, absolutely, but nothing more than my kids. Oh my goodness. At least once a day, I think, huh, why did I react that way? What is
right,
hiding in that rock that I need to take care of because they're reflecting this thing back to me that I don't want to project into their existence. That's not their problem.
right,
So I feel like we're
right.
constantly unraveling and taking apart, and I have to apologize to them a lot. And I tell them, baby, mama is not perfect, but I will always do my best. And I will always apologize when I hurt you, which I will
Yeah,
never do on purpose, but it's going to happen because I'm not perfect.
right. I mean, I recently had to apologize to my daughter quite a few times because she relishes in telling the story to others, but similar to the story that you were telling about being forced to eat food. I mean, when she was younger, I was so in my mind, so focused on not wasting food that when I would pack her lunch and she brought it home and didn't finish it, I would make her finish it. And if she didn't finish it, she would have to eat it for dinner or breakfast the next day. And she let me know she's now this happened when she was like 6 or 7, maybe like for like 3 or 4 years, right? And now she's 15 and she was just like, "You made me do that, and I had to eat the bad stuff in order to eat the good stuff." And I literally was just like, "Oh my god, I can't believe I did that." And I still have regret, and even though I've apologized, but it's just like, "Oh," and then you just told the story and it's just like, "Oh," reminding me again, like, "How could I have done that to my child?" But,
Mm.
we learn and we grow.
And we all have those things. And so many of our beliefs as parents, whether we're aware of it or not, are holdovers from how we were raised. Even if they're things that we said we would never do, we're so often unaware that we are programmed. We have these stress responses, these created ways of protecting ourselves that we learn from the people who raise us, and quite unconsciously we start incorporating that into our own way of interacting with the world. And I've had so many moments just like that, where
Yeah.
I did something or created something where a part of me clearly thought I was doing the right thing, but then later I thought that wasn't even me. That
Oh,
was my, say a parent surfacing or an old teacher surfacing. And honestly, my husband and I both have had to really unravel our issues about food. My husband was born in Africa, so he has a lot of scarcity conversation around food. So
mhm.
he wouldn't mind my saying this because we're very open about our complete screw ups as parents and how hard we are really trying to learn and to grow. But he had a lot of issues around never ever wasting food. And there's an upside to that, right? There's a beautiful intention in there to honor what we have and it be sufficient and make sure the community has enough. But of course, that can go dark as well. And
Yeah.
then I love to cook, and it's one of the ways I express my love. So I was having ego about when they didn't eat it. So I had to, we always have these things reflected back to us that we have to work on. So it is a gift, but you're so right. It's imperative that we put our egos down and get out of the way and let them teach us.
Yeah. Yeah, and that reminds me of the other story that my daughter told me was because I reminded her that when she was maybe 5 or 6, she wouldn't eat her oatmeal, and I literally sat down and cried, and she started laughing. And I couldn't believe that, oh my God, in my mind, I'm like, she's so insensitive, right? But she told me, now that she's 15, was like, no, it was because you made me eat oatmeal every single day, and it wasn't even that good. And at that point, when you were forcing me to eat it, I just refused. I didn't want it. I don't want it anymore. I now have like oatmeal issues because of you. And I was happy that I didn't have to eat it that day. Oh, the trials of parenting.
Oh my goodness. And it's difficult because we're trying so hard, right? Like we love these babies more than our own lives. And there's nothing I would not do for these kids, but it
Right,
doesn't keep me from messing up at least once a day. I
right.
yelled this morning and had to apologize. But then when I think back to my childhood, nobody ever apologized. No
No,
one ever acknowledged that there might have been another way to see it or that I might genuinely have experienced it differently. In fact,
right.
to this day, that hasn't happened. And that's okay. My parents yeah, it was a different era, and especially their parents, I think, passed on a lot of the ideas of, the children should be seen and not heard. You simply be grateful for what you have. You don't push back. And I
Mm,
never saw it as pushing back. I was trying to be honest about how I was feeling. But
right,
that was not acceptable in my
right.
house.
You were articulating your truth.
Yes. So I am trying to honor that in my babies.
Yes, aren't we all? Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's work.
Yeah. Yes.
So,
Yeah.
in your growing up years, did you ever find any adults that empathize with your sensitivity? Were you able to share at least some of it with somebody that made you feel like you can stand in your truth?
Yes, here and there. It's funny because I look back and it's clear to me that I didn't really start finding what I would call my soul tribe, my people, till I
Mhm.
was much older.
Yeah,
But the universe definitely put a few people in my path in different ways to let me know that I was not crazy. The experience I was having was valid and genuine, and that I really needed to listen to my gut no matter what the external world at large was saying. And one of them was, I called her my aunt, but she was really my mother's cousin. But she
mhm,
was the only adult who was really present in my house much other than my mom, who was there to witness who my dad really was. And I don't mean anything negative about my father, but it was an abusive house. And I no longer carry really any anger about that because I have worked through it. But, for a lot of years, no one believed that what was happening in that house was happening because nobody had ever seen it because he
mhm,
was so good at putting on a very different face, a very happy show, the perfect existence to the outside world. And so
mhm,
no one knew what was going on behind closed doors except my aunt. And,
mhm,
I think she had a childhood similar to mine. And so we were very kindred spirits. And the funny thing was, looking back, I realized I knew that about her long before she ever said it, because I don't think we ever had the conversation till I was in my later teens. But I
mm.
always knew, I could feel
Yep,
in her that she was sharing my experience. And sure enough, she were very similar creatures. So I was very grateful for her.
yeah.
And then, oddly, when I was very little, and anyone who's read my book knows that a lot of the source of conflict between me and my family is that they are deeply, deeply religious, dogmatic, in fact. And I saw the world differently. And so I used to get dragged to church a lot. But um, in the context of that, I met a young woman. I believe I was 6 or 7 years old at the time. She was 26, and her name was Kathy. And I met her when she was dying of cancer. And she was so young. And I could feel that all the adults around me were, it's as if they were panicked, like they didn't know what to say, they didn't know what to do or how to relate to her. And I don't recall ever seeing her with anyone. It seemed like she was alone in the world, and I don't know
Mhm.
why. I was just a
Yeah.
little kid. But to me, she looked like an angel. She glowed. She was lit from within. And for some reason, the moment we met, we connected on such a deep level. And I remember thinking, are you my guardian angel? And she didn't even live for a month after I met her. And I was a
Wow.
little girl, but I will never forget her. She made an imprint on my soul that was so deep. I will never forget her. And sometimes I still see her when I meditate. So I
Yeah,
think she was probably one of my guides.
she is.
I loved her, and there was no logical reason for that at all.
Right,
And
right.
then, lastly, when I was little, I got a hold of one of Dr. Christiane Northrup's books.
Mhm.
And it was Women's Bodies, Women's Wisdom.
Yep.
And I started reading it. That was my escape anyway, was reading.
Yeah.
My family, they enjoyed other pursuits like the gun shows and things. So I was outside reading.
Yeah.
And so I'd read everything I could get my hands on, and I got a hold of this book. And I remember reading when she describes her experience of having visions and being able to feel other people's emotions. That was the first time I had ever seen anyone recount my experience.
Yeah.
And of course, I'd never met her. I didn't even understand really who she was in the world, but I felt such a kinship. I thought, okay, so I'm not a freak. Well, maybe, but I'm not the strange alien being that I
Mm.
seem to be to all these other people. And I carried that book around for years. I still have it.
It's
And
ginormous.
oh yeah, it meant so much to me because I had never seen my experience reflected like that before, especially not by someone who is out there talking about it, putting it out there, writing books, helping people, helping to heal others. And
Mm.
so, she was always my hero. And, I have to tell you a quick funny story. I've always just admired her so much from afar. So, when I wrote my book and it
Mhm.
had come time to figure out who was gonna write the foreword and the afterword and all these things, I thought, "Goodness." And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, "There's no one I would rather write my foreword than her, but, how could I even find her? I don't know her." So, that very day I'm driving down the road and my dear friend Susan called me and she said, "Hi, not calling for a reason, but if I think of you 3 times, I have to call you." I said, "Oh, okay." So we're chatting about what we're doing, where we're going. She is on her way to an event with Christiane Northrup.
Oh,
And I
what?
felt that divine soul resonance. I was like, "Thank you, God. Got it." So I told her, I was like, "I really would love to meet her or talk to her." And I was thinking, I don't want to bother her, but this is clearly divine.
Yeah.
She called me an hour later. And from the moment we got on the phone, it was like talking to my soul sister.
Ah,
So anyway, long story short, she graciously agreed to write my foreword, and we have been dear friends ever since. And I appreciate her so much. So she is still my hero.
yes, and her forward was really wonderful. I read your book via audiobook, so I was listening to your book and I listened to the forward first and really not having any idea of what your book is about, just listening to the forward, I was getting shivers because her words are really magical. That forward is really powerful.
It is.
Yeah.
It's getting chills just thinking about it. Yeah, she is an incredibly powerful, wise, and beautiful soul. And I hope she wouldn't mind my saying, in a lot of ways, I've always felt like she was my fairy godmother because I really needed her as a child. Never did I imagine I would get to call her a friend in adulthood, which is just the greatest blessing. But I
Yeah.
don't think she'll ever know how much she really did for me when I was a little girl.
I know. It's interesting because we say, angels show up in different ways, and it doesn't even have to be in human form. I feel like books talk to us as well, and we get the words when we need them.
Yes. Absolutely. I don't think I'd be here if I hadn't had my books to
Yeah.
escape into and to relate to and to give me support I didn't even know I was looking for.
Yeah.
My lifeline.
So, I mean, would you be able to share maybe for adults that are ever around children? right? Because we want to be those people that are like lights to children who might not be experiencing the world as they would want to be experiencing. Are there ways that these adults can be mindful of the ways that children communicate outside of words?
Oh, yes, that's such an interesting question. So I know I certainly did that as a child. I was trying to communicate my needs, but I think even better, I can share how my children and a lot of the children that I help care for in the realm of children who've been abused or trafficked, there's so much nonverbal communication. And a lot of it is probably already obvious to some, but I'll mention it anyway, just because not everyone is in that world, but some of it is not. So for a child, I've noticed that if you're engaging or if they're asking you a question or trying to create some sort of connection, the moment that child looks down at the floor, it's because you've lost them in some way. They are feeling like either you're not believing them, you're not honoring them, or so often they turn it on themselves, especially kids who've been abused, like, "Oh, that must be stupid what I said," or "That must like, I shouldn't have said that," and the second they look down, there's now a narrative in their head that is self punishment. And so not only are they no longer engaging, they are creating neural pathways that are destructive and are ultimately going to keep them from taking the risk of reaching out in the future. And it could be over something large, but it could also be over a juice box. Like with little ones, people say little kids, little problems, big kids, big problems. And one of the other wisest things I have ever heard is that if you don't listen to children when they're little and they want to talk to you about the little things like they broke their crayon or they stubbed their toe, if you're not there, present and loving and honoring the depth of the experience they're having, because that's a big deal in the life of a little person, they're not going to come to you in the future when they really have problems that they need help with. They're not going to trust you when they, start having crushes or going through puberty. Um, the other, so I have three boys. They are now, all pretty recently, 11, 8, and 6. And God bless all of them, but my eldest, that's sweet. I feel like we kind of grow up with our eldest children in a way because we've never done this before. Anything that we have not resolved is going to end up on that child.
Yep.
And so, in so many ways, they're our partner for a
Mhm.
while in terms of like how we really grow up and get out of our own way. And so, with my sweet boy, it's really been a journey, and so he's taught me so much, and he's helped me really figure out the ways that I still needed to do some work.
Mhm.
And I have, I hope, really taken that on. And so, we've had some ups and downs, and last night I was tucking him in, and we were just chatting because these days, he doesn't. He's preteen. He doesn't really need to be tucked in. He doesn't need the same things as he used to.
Mhm.
But he said to me, "Mama, I'm so glad that I can trust you because I don't know who else I would talk to about this." And he was talking to me about something specific. He said, "Even my friends," he said, even when I think you're going to get mad, you don't. And even when I mess up, you always let me know that you still love me." And it made me cry because that's taken some time. It didn't start that way. I would have outsized crazy reactions but my greatest fear was shutting him down before he even grew into himself. So these days, no matter what they say, and sometimes I know what's coming, I'm not gonna like when my middle child says, "Mom, I'm sorry, you're gonna be mad." Yeah, I really tried to steel myself and just calm down. And now instead of yelling at them or getting upset, I try so hard to be cool. Okay.
Yeah.
But then I ask them, "So what did you learn from that experience?" And that helps them embody the lesson and why it actually would behoove them to make a better decision in the future. But it's not me saying you were wrong. You did badly, because that's wounding and that
Right.
is groundwork.
Shameful.
Yeah. And I'm still trying to shed my own shame. Still, I work on this every day.
Mhm.
And, we're far from perfect. We still we're doing our best, but at least we can acknowledge it when it happens. And I do my best to walk it back and unravel and let them know, you know what, I responded this way because of
Mhm.
this in my life or how I was feeling. And it wasn't you at all. So I don't
Right.
ever want you to be afraid to tell me that.
Yeah.
So
So keeping the
there,
lines of communication open at all times.
yes, yes. And really, really taking a moment just to pause before you react. Because so many of the things that I was taught, honestly, are nonsense. Things like you have to fold the laundry this way only. You can only eat this on a certain day. Like just arbitrary, strange things that I was taught were rules. And I still sometimes have a knee-jerk reaction or a response about it because it's in there.
Yeah.
And so when I inadvertently thrust that upon a child, I try to address it right in that second and let them know why, what was going on for me. And that also opens the door for them to be honest about how they were really feeling about it. Like, well,
Yeah.
actually, that really hurt my feelings.
Right.
Um,
Right. I want to go back to when you were talking about the moment a child looks to the ground, you've lost them. Is there a repair? If you see that happening, is there a repair?
I think so. It depends on the child, the age, and the situation. So in our house, when that happens, as soon as I see that, I know I've messed up big time. And then I scoop them up. They're all still scoopable. I make them look at me. I say, I am so sorry that whatever I just said or did made you feel like you can't talk to me anymore. I say, would you please tell me the rest of the story? Please, it depends on the age, but if it's my youngest, I say, did I hurt your feelings? Because usually that's what it is. When they're little, you've hurt their feelings.
Yeah.
And then I have them tell me, and then I clean it up. With my eldest, he can usually be a little more explicit about what it is. And I tell him, would you please tell me the rest of the truth? And I promise I will not be angry. I will love you and support you no matter what. And even if I don't like it, I'm going to deal with my own feelings about that. And I'm going to be here for you. Would you please give me another chance?
Yeah.
And he does. Now, if I'm with kids who have been abused their whole lives, say they're 12, 13, 14, they've been trafficked, they've been passed around, that's a very different situation because there's already very little trust. Really, so often no one has ever been there for them. And even worse, very often the people who are supposed to take care of them and protect them are the ones who sold them into that life. So that's very different. But, I essentially do a version of the same where I tell them, "Look, I am so sorry. I'm not perfect. What I really want is to help you. What would that look like? What can I do right now that's gonna help you have a better day?" Even if it's as simple as a hug or leave me alone, whatever it is. And then I try to really honor it just to let them know that they can trust me, maybe not to never screw up, but to do my best. And to clean it up when I do.
Yeah, and also we have to remember that children are so connected energetically. They feel the energy. So when you come and you're genuine, they can feel that, right? If
Yeah,
you have that intention to really connect and be kind and really honor them, I think they can feel that.
definitely. Because it works the other way too. So often I've seen people phone it in with, the apology and not really mean it, and kids always know. And they might be gracious and on the surface appear to respond, but they're gonna remember that, and that's gonna be labeled an unsafe person in their mind in the future.
Right.
So, yeah, I totally agree. Kids know. They're so intuitive and they're so much closer to the divine,
Mhm.
than we are. And sometimes I even ask them what I should have done differently or how I could
Mhm.
have done it better. And it's amazing to hear their responses. They will say things that I would never have expected or thought
Oh,
of. Or sometimes they're upset about something that is completely different than the thing I assumed they were upset over.
right.
So it's, we're just always learning. So I try to let them know that whatever it is they need to say, I'm going to do my best to receive it gracefully. And if I mess it up, I will try again. So, and that we're working together, and that
Yeah.
there's no manual, there's no parenting. They don't come with a guide. So
No, it really doesn't come with a guide. The guide is, like, right in front of you.
yeah,
I feel
yeah,
like a lot of what you're sharing requires a lot of patience. First of all, you're saying, to pause before we react to anything, but even just to be slow enough to recognize body language and see when a child has looked down on the ground. It just seems like we need to slow down to a really, really slow pace when we're parents or anytime we're around children, it seems.
yes. That's actually one of the reasons I love homeschooling. And I know we're going to cover that next time, but that it gives you that opportunity. I thought I was already spending a lot of time with my kids, and I was certainly trying to, but before I broke down my own limitations and realized that we don't actually have to put them in that environment in a school in this prison like for some children system, I really didn't know how much I was missing out on. And
Yeah.
so having them with you and being able to really take that journey together, and whether it's school or the emotional journey of growing up, my eldest, like I said, is starting to go through puberty, and my youngest is emerging from babyhood and starting to be a little boy in the world and getting curious and lighting things on fire. So me being with them most of the day, it really creates this beautiful ease where you can check in, because it's not as if you're trying immediately to rush them to school and then this activity and that activity and then cram in homework and dinner, and then before you know it, it's bedtime and you're up again.
Right.
And I felt like our lives were passing us by and our children were turning into people we didn't even recognize, and that's on us.
Right.
So I agree, slowing it down and really, I know this sounds cliche, but the older I get, the more I realize it's so important to embody. We have to enjoy the journey because it goes so fast. Now I'm
Mhm.
gonna cry too. I can't believe, I blinked and my baby is 11. And this boy, when he was 2 years old, we used to live in New York, and I had taken him to Central Park. And that day, there was a very unhappy woman who was screaming at her child and other children, and she screamed at my son. And I have to admit, that is one way for all of my consciousness to go right out the window. And then the mama bear comes out, and I go feral. And I'm getting better at it. But boy, messing with my babies is one way to see the less evolved side of me. So even at 2, he clearly picked up on how angry I was at this woman for what I saw as crossing a huge line.
Mhm.
And she was just so unkind to her own child. It was actually heartbreaking. And so we're going home, and my little boy in the stroller said, "Mama, I want to tell you something." He said, "I know that was a mean lady, but you're a nice lady. And if you're nice to her, she'll turn into a nice lady. She doesn't know how." 2 years old. And I burst into tears. I had an otherworldly event. I was thinking, who is this angelic, unbelievable child?
Right.
I have Gandhi in my stroller. What is happening? And that was I really realized, I thought, wow, he is so much wiser than I am. And that hasn't changed. And now that he's 11, he is out in the world actively trying to figure out how to make communities stronger, how to make people happier. After the hurricanes, he and a bunch of his friends were out here creating bags of groceries and taking them all over town, walking up, asking people if they were okay, lending a hand.
Yes.
They're just incredible.
Mhm.
So I realized they're really, even there are children and they come through us, but really they are entirely sovereign souls that
Yes.
we have the great gift
Mm.
of stewarding for a while.
Yeah.
And we need to take advantage. We only have a few short years to do that. So
Yeah.
it matters. Every moment matters.
It matters. And when we talk about deprogramming from the systems and finding our own truth, these children before us that are in front of us, they show us the way. It's so joyful to do the work because while we're shedding our egos because our children are showing up as these wisdom keepers, right? We get to really tap into ourselves. And there's joy in traveling this path together.
Yes. Yes. So much so. There's a sharing that can happen when everyone is in a place of
Yeah.
true authenticity and no one is hiding behind the ego or the should be or the shame or the trauma. And in fact, it happened last night when I was just laying talking to my son before bed. I forget that I am talking to an 11-year-old because the wisdom this child is carrying is ageless and enormous. And it's
Yeah.
so clear to me that he came to Earth to share that. And
Right.
I see it in my other boys too. They all have very different gifts, but very clear reasons for being here. And I'm so honored that they chose me because I believe we choose our parents and
Yeah.
that's the lessons that we need to learn as a soul level. And then it's a partnership. We grow and journey together.
Yeah.
And I told him a version of what I just told you that, I've learned far more from him than I think
Yeah.
he's learned from me. And I'm so grateful he's here. And every time, with the world the way it is, and there's, of course, a lot of darkness becoming visible. Not that it
Yeah.
wasn't always there, it's just coming to the surface. But
Yeah.
so often I hear people, oh, the world is going to hell in a handbasket. Oh, it's end of times. And I think, no, look at these children. Look at these kids.
Yeah.
This is God incarnate right there. Humanity's
Mhm.
going to be fine. We have some growing pains to work through, and
Yeah.
these kids are helping us to do the work we have to do, right? We
Yeah.
have to shed our trauma so we don't keep paying it forward. It's been going on for generations, and it's time for that to stop.
Yeah. And we have so many resources around us, and your book is one of them, like your book, like I said when we had the conversation, your book, even though it's talking about darkness and your experience growing up, it's filled with light. It's filled with light, and so that when you're done reading the book, you just feel empowered.
Thank
So
you.
thank you. Thank you for your book.
My pleasure. My pleasure. I tell my husband all the time if that childhood was the price for the happiness I get to enjoy now with my amazing husband and our beautiful kids, I would do it 1,000 times over.
Yeah, and that's a beautiful perspective. Thank you. Thank you so much, Brianna.
Mm, my pleasure.
I just wanted to ask really quickly, what does it look like when people contact you for coaching? Do you only work with, like, trauma victims or
No, I've come to believe more and more that the people who need me find me. So I have clients that run the gamut, all ages, races, nationalities, levels of experience, some very severe and palpable trauma in
Mhm.
this incarnation, some that have clearly carried it forward through their ancestry that don't remember having that experience at all. So no, I feel like they find me. So I'm happy to work with anyone who feels called to work with me. And the easiest way is just to go to my website and send me a note. I offer free consultations to see if it's a fit and we feel like we could do wonderful work together. So my website is just my name, briannaladapo.com. So please feel free to reach out.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Is there anything else you might wanna add before we end our time together?
One last thing, and it's a little expansion on the last thing that we were talking about, but I really do believe, I just more than believe, I know in my soul that we are here to create the beautiful world that we're all working toward. This is not end of times. There will be death of the things that are not serving us, but that's a blessing. And it's going to look a little dark for a while. People shouldn't be surprised to see disaster and rockiness and fighting. And it doesn't mean that it isn't terrible, but we do choose our experience. And the only way to really create a vibration so high that you're in the world, but no longer of the world. You're not subject to those types of traumas, emotions, attacks, is to do the work on your own trauma. Get it out of the way, transmute it out of your experience. And then, of course, not only are you not saddling future generations with it,
Yeah.
but you'll finally get to be free. And it's a wonderful experience. Even though, yeah, there are terrible things happening all over the world, I still wake up every morning thrilled, invigorated, and excited to do what I can to help and to fix it. And I'm not worn out. I'm excited. And that's because I know that humanity and love will prevail. Love wins. Like spoiler
Love
alert.
wins. That's
Yeah.
why all these children are coming in. They're pure love.
Yes. So I don't want people to worry. There is no other way for this to end. Now, how we get there, who knows? We're in this together, but it doesn't matter. The ending is foretold. Love wins. So
Love
there's
wins.
nothing, people don't need to waste their energy on darkness.
Right.
The light is going to win. So it's time to jump on the light side.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you
Yeah,
so
thank
much.
you. Thank you for that reminder and just always be in light, raise our vibrations, and read Emerging from Darkness.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too. Bye bye.
Bye.